I'm going to ask you a question. Give me a one-line job description of a parent. Good question, eh? One all should ask. Well, my definition is a person who works for 20 years to create a successful adult. But that means that we have to make that person successful in the time they will be an adult, which means if we put on a parent's hat, we are intuitively thinking about 20 years ahead. Whether we are conscious of that or not, it's part of our chemistry and our biology. We are caring and growing something over 20 years for future success in 20 years' time. Now, I think it's very important in this world where people claim we're becoming too short-term is to remind us that we all have that skill and capability. And the other thing is what we're trying to do is actually we're not what we are called probable futurists, we are preferred futurists. We actually want a certain kind of person with certain values which we work towards. It's not just say, well, we can actually create a person who has two capabilities. One is to be a resilient future taker, and the other one is to be a purposeful future maker of their own career paths, their own lives, and of the world around them. Now, we all are shapers of the future. Indeed, no one doesn't shape the future in some way. You people, more than most, are very heavily involved in shaping the future because you control such huge investment funds. So basically, it's important to remember there are 6 tools we use to shape the future: leadership, management, planning, design, innovation and learning. You notice I talk about leadership being the purposeful future maker and management being the resilient future taker. Down the bottom, under innovation, I talk about developing the new means to do old and current things better and new things first. And I use the words ways and wheres. I want you to listen to me, but this is a very important definition of ways and wheres because it's going to pepper my cork, because I'm going to talk about the nature of the markets and the products and services which will be on the world markets in 20 to 25 and even up to 40 years' time in 2050. Can we predict that? I think we can, and I'm going to show you how. But ways and wheres are probably 70% of the job categories and the products and services of the year 2030 have yet to be invented. Now, can we predict those? We can't predict them precisely, but we can actually predict what they will be in one other way, by their purpose. Ways are the new things we have to learn to do, behavioural shifts. Wheres are the new things we use, technologies and toolkits of one sort or another. So, for example, a water conservation way would be shortening your shower from 6 to 3 minutes. And a water conservation where would be a new low-volume shower head. Together, we can create water conservation. Now, basically, what we do to create that is up to us. But if we define innovations of yet unborn processes and technologies by defining their purpose, we can have all sorts of conversations, okay? Now, each of us is a futurist. We all are concerned about the future, as I said. But there's 2 kinds of parts, toolkits for the future. One is what they call the profit bit, who answers the question, what will the future be like? What are the trends? And where are they taking us? And management is really all about saying, wow, we're going there. How do we make $1 out of it or not get run over by it, and making shifts? The other side is the visionary, the what should or could be the future, what I call the preferred future. That's the toolkit of the leader. So we're both manager and leader, both of us. But in Australia, I would suggest that we're an over-managed and under-led country. Yes? Okay? We're too much into trends and responding to them and not enough having vision and going out and making things that ought to happen because they're good and they must happen. Are we not? Absolutely. Amen. So it's important to remember that we're over-managed and under-led. And when we actually are the manager part of us, we're actually what I call problem-centred strategists. Problem-centred strategists say, well, this is the problems today, what we have to eliminate them so we can go on unchanged. And indeed, in Australia, to be a great problem solver is a heroic badge. I tentatively suggest to you it's a national curse. If all we're doing in the future is removing bad things from the future and overcoming problems, we're merely creating a future which is less awful. Not wonderful, not magnificent, not heroic. To create one of those, we have to imagine a wonderful, magnificent or heroic future. We cannot work to create a future which we do not first imagine. Okay? The mission part, the leadership part is called the mission-directed strategist. This is where I'd like to go. This is the mission I have to create to go there. And there are obstacles I need to remove. There are new initiatives I need to take. There are improvements I need to make. The heritage I have to keep and nurture. So when we change everything else, we don't throw babies with bathwater. And there's also baggage we have to identify, which is preventing us changing. We must throw out if we want to move together at all. And that difference between the manager part of us and the leader part of it was summed up by George Bernard Shaw when he said, "Some people see things as they are and ask why. I see things as they could be and ask why not." So, the leader and shaper of change is part of the story. But there's also a big trend happening because we are being taken somewhere now. It's like as if we were sitting in a sailboat and that we were going where the tide takes you. We leave the sail down, we take our hand off the tiller and we go where the tide takes you. You wouldn't want to do that because tides never take you to paradise. Onto the rocks perhaps. You wouldn't get in a sailboat for that purpose. You would get in for a purpose. If it was to win a race, you would want to get on the windward side of the fleet and pick up the wind shift first and win by getting to the future first. Success goes to those who get to the future first. Now, there's one problem with all of us sailors, however. We all have the genes of cave dwellers. When we evolved as humanity, change was rare and change was always awful. So we developed a flight and fight system to fight and prepare for change. Not a very useful band of things, toolkits to have in our genes when we're going in this incredible 21st century. So put that bag of genes in the sailor going to windwards. Wind shifts come and go. Some will be opportunities and some will be threats. But any wind shift will be perceived to be an ill wind shift to a sailor who has no course. Now let's talk 2050. Have you noticed there's a national conversation or global conversation about the year 2050? Lots of people are saying, well, if by 2050 we haven't created a climate-safe world, we probably won't ever do it. In other words, there's a time spot, 2 generations hence, to the life of our grandchildren, 4 decades, to prepare the world for that. And we're also talking about our population projections. Our current immigration, what will be the product of those in 2050? Have you noticed this conversation about 2050 is now becoming mainstream? So I've focused a lot on the year 2050, and I want you to imagine that by 2050 we've created a planet that's prosperous, sustainable, secure, harmonious and just. Good place to go? What would we have to do to create such a thing? What are the new innovations we need to create? What are the markets we have to create? And so on to create that world. Well, we can actually do that because I actually think we can look forward and predict what the markets of 2030 and 2035 will want to buy and sell. Lots of people say you can't predict the future. Well, I'm going to share with you how I think we can predict the future and what kind of markets will be around in 2030 and 2050. So you can put your superannuation funds more clearly and carefully. Now, this involves to say, well, we should invest in this. Is there a good trend? You actually make a decision. But there's no science in it. There's no clear idea about what is unfolding. Do we have a set of yardsticks or set of a toolkit to measure where we should place our investments for future success? Not only in terms of returning income to the members of the fund, but also making the world a better place for everybody else. Can we do those simultaneously? I think we can. Okay. So, the year 2050. And the important thing about 2050 is it's going to happen, so are we going to be ready for it and are we going to thrive in that world? Well, I want you to aspire to thrive. And I had to invent a word called thrival as an aspirational goal. We have survival as an aspirational goal, but not thrival. What does that say about the lack of loftiness of the aspirations of English-speaking people that I actually had to invent the word? Okay. Now, how can we tell what markets will buy and sell in 30 years' time? If I understand the dominant values in the year 2030, that will determine what people value and find to be valuable in 2030. What they value and find to be valuable, they will want more of and create products and services and markets for, right? Now, we can do that because since the Berlin Wall fell, we've created a global market economy where the aspirations and goals and the desires and wishes of people determine what's bought and sold. So if we can get into the psyche of the yearnings of people, particularly the booming middle class, we can actually pick this up now very quickly. So I think we can do that. So there are three big trends which are creating this. Globalisation, you all know about. Interconnectedness. Trading across borders. About 30% of all products and services today cross one international boundary between when they're made and when they're consumed. Going up about 5% per decade. Globalisation is changing the world. Globalisation is growing the size of the middle class of the world by the population of New York City every 3 months. There are now 550 million in the global middle class of India plus China. Now, educated middle class people actually are pretty much the same the world over. They want 2 kids, they want them to go to university, they believe in democracy, they believe in sustainability, and a clean, green environment, and a few things like that. In other words, the values of the global middle class are there. And it's informing global public opinion in all sorts of ways. For example, we all agree today that Colonel Gaddafi is a bad man. Okay? We also believe that Tibet should be free. And East Timor should be free. I could go on and on about that, but there's now emerging a thing which we can call global public opinion. And we're seeing that now urging the changes and the rise of democracy in the Middle East and North Africa. Just a recent example of that. Earlier on, we were giving money away to tsunami people in Aceh, to bushfire people in Victoria, to earthquake people in Haiti, and so on and so on and so on. We are now involved in the world, and we are willing to part with money to give it to people that we've never known before. We still don't know, and probably will never know, but we feel it's our obligation to do that, to be good planetary citizens. Good planetary citizens. Back in 1624, John Donne wrote a very famous poem. And this poem went like this. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is part of a continent, part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as much as a promontory were, as much as the estate of my friends or mine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never set to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So while Colonel Gaddafi was running roughshod over the rebels in northern Libya, and the people of the United Nations couldn't make up their mind whether they're going to respond or not, how did we feel? Agonised and probably pretty damn angry, did we not? Touch your own feelings at that moment. We said we have to respond to protect these people, not be murdered by their own autocratic dictator. This is a powerful weapon which is shaping the global. Those values inside those people are shaping the planet. So we have to understand how they are. So globalisation is happening, but there's a couple of other big trends too. Another one I call tribalisation. This is an interesting one because have you noticed we're breaking into smaller bits? The old Soviet Union, a Russian empire, is now 15 separate countries with Azerbaijan, Lithuania and so on, free. The old Yugoslavian empire, the Serbian empire, is now 7, with Montenegro and Kosovo becoming free in the last 12 months. To our north, the Javanese empire is Indonesia. East Timorese have become independent. The Achenese would like to, and so would the West Papuans, and so on. To the north is the Han Empire of China. China is 60% Han and 40% minorities. But if you happen to be Uyghur or Tibetan or Manchurian or Mongolian or Setsuanese, you actually would rather like to control your own destiny and not have the Han tell you. And the important point about that is I would predict that it would be very hard for the Chinese to repeat Tiananmen Square today. The changes since then or not, we would not put up with it. The anger would probably be an entire boycott on Chinese goods and services for a while, because global anger would go through the roof. Would it not? Ask yourself that question. So, that's tribalisation. Now, tribalisation and globalisation are creating whole new genres of industries. One of the best ones is world music. World music is tribal music, but we do go to Womat and Adelaide and places like that to celebrate not only the diversity of humanity, but the unity of humanity simultaneously, do we not? and you go into what I call a world food hall, where you know there's a pile of chairs and tables in the middle, and around the outside are 15 or 20 cuisines. You pick and choose which you want. We must remember that 55 or 60 years ago, to eat another person's food was a form of tribal treachery. Okay, that's how the world has shifted. So the third one is technological connectedness. Now this is huge. You're all very familiar with this. We now can work in real time through Twitter and Facebook and all the things out, and the technologies are now informing people so they go and, for example, march in the streets of Bahrain. That doesn't make them happen. Their yearning for freedom does, but this toolkit helps them be able to do it well, yes? So, technology, tribalisation and globalisation are creating a planetary society here and now in this generation for the first time in human history. Back after the age of enlightenment, we invented a thing called modernism. Modernity, a la mode. Modernity simply meant that everything new was great, everything old was old-fashioned now. Old-fashioned, remember that key word, old-fashioned? It was driven by another mindset which we call progress. In my father's generation, progress was innately good. You can't stop progress, he would say. And we used to have all these, quote, progress associations, all gone today, every one of them. The idea that we have progress is a bit of a nonsense. We don't need them anymore because we understood that progress was sometimes a mixed blessing. And sometimes we did some unspeakable things in the name of progress. For example, we made a mess of the environment. We ran over the top of Indigenous people and crushed them and quite assimilated them or worse. So we became postmodern people. And Joni Mitchell telegraphed the time of the change in 1970 with a famous song, Big Yellow Taxi, where she talked about paving paradise and putting up a parking lot. So we became postmodern people. Postmodernism says, well, old things can be very good, and we should combine in the future the best of the old with the best of the new. Not just everything old is out and everything new is in. We actually put a yardstick of quality and meaningfulness on the things we put in. And postmodern people are like that. So postmodern, if you go to your doctor, for example, the doctor's a modernist, he says, well, here's your script, go to the chemist and get it filled. But you said, well, I might check out the acupuncturist or the Ayurvedic medical specialist or the Filipino faith healer. You understand the world's arts and sciences have a whole range of healing arts and sciences which have nothing to do with the West. And you personally customise your own healing solution based on a combination of the best of the old and the best of the new. That's classical postmodernity at work. And postmodernity forced us to change our language. What we used to call swamps became wetlands. What we call slums became heritage precincts. We don't talk about swamps, draining swamps and clearing slums anymore, do we? All gone. Because postmodernity doesn't accept those things as meaningful. So now a great architect won't knock down a beautiful heritage building because it's a bit old-fashioned and put a monstrous thing inside which is high-tech. What they'll do is take the heritage building and retrofit it with new stuff, right? The best of the old, the best of the new, in a way. So postmodernity is around today, but it's only a stepping stone to the next big paradigm which is emerging today. And I've given the name planetism to this. Planetism is very simple. Tribalism is first allegiance to tribe. Nationalism is first allegiance to nation. Planetism is first allegiance to planet. Are we all planetists? Mostly we are. And when we say John Howard says we're not going to sign the Kyoto Protocol, it's not in the national interest, and a few other people have echoed him, I said yes, but it's in the planetary interest. Sometimes we have to make a decision. Is the community we're going to be part of today the planet or the nation? And sometimes we have a decision between the two. We have to actually understand that we live in a series of communities from small neighbourhoods through to the planet, like a series of Russian dolls, one inside the other. And that's what's happening today. So planetism is emerging. Planetism is, I think, becoming fairly well entrenched now, even though I gave a name to it and to identify it. But all those young people were basically planetists. Now they're saying we have to fix the climate up and a whole lot of other things. Okay? So what is how can we understand planetism? Well, one of the ways we can do it is imagine yourself on the crew of a multicultural, bi-gender spaceship going through space. What are the values and operation rules we would need to have so that crew can complete the mission together. And a few times, there'll be difficulties. And Garrett Hardin created a kind of rule for that. He said, well, what we have to do under those circumstances is find ways of mutual coercion we can mutually agree upon. And mutual coercion, that's climate change today. That's the World Trade Organization today. That's dealing with weapons of mass destruction today. We are actually having to understand that we all live in a single planetary thing called Spaceship Earth. That word was invented by Buckminster Fuller and Kenneth Boulding back in the late 60s. And Kenneth Boulding talked about going from the cowboy to the spaceship economy. He didn't actually talk about what he meant by that. I spent the last 20 years of my life giving meaning to that, trying to work out what we mean by the, quote, cowboy economy, or what we mean by the spaceship economy, okay? And spaceship economy is around today. So we are actually inventing ways to living on our spaceship, all sorts of ways, so we can collaborate in all sorts of ways. So now just think about this. The 19th century was a century of dependence. Most of us lived in colonies. The 20th century was about independence becoming free. The 21st century is about interdependence. The key word of the 21st century is interdependence. And that's like dependent children to independent adults, independent adolescents to interdependent adults. We know that the complexities of the interdependent relationship is the highest form of relationship. It's two people forming a love bond and setting out life together. It's a supply chain. It's a loyalty scheme with Qantas. It's a relationship with the environment. It's a political union, which is Europe. And it's interesting because you think about Europe, Lithuania was dependent on the Russian Empire until the Berlin Wall came down. They went from dependence to independence and celebrated their Lithuanianness as a separate culture for the first time in 60 or 70 years. But 4 years later, they joined Europe. They gave up some of their independence to join Europe. And all interdependence is about one kind of set of rules. Two people coming together, or two entities come together, or more sometimes, and to say, what are the things we need to agree upon so we can live together? We have to give up some of our independence so we can have a benefit that comes from union. And that's what forms of coercion can we mutually agree upon. And the nature of the interdependent world, interdependence is the key word of the 21st century. Good businesses are now not into competition. They understand that actually forming great long-term interdependent relationship with suppliers and with companies and forming long-term loyalty programs and collaboration is the secret to success. And blind competition for its own is gone. It's going, but collaboration between corporate entities now is more focused. We can collaborate so we can do something together and achieve something together. And the joint ventures are becoming much more a model for doing things in all sorts of ways. Amalgamating not just to get bigger, but to marry different skills so we can do new things that we couldn't do separately. That's the whole nature of what that's about. So we have that kind of... So let's talk about planetism. They're the views there. You see, 1960 to 2020 up there, okay? And there are 9 value shifts there. I'm going to quickly talk about each of them because this describes the 21st century economy. That's why it's so important. Individualism to communitarianism. Communitarianism is not about communism, it's about communities. It's about working together in communities to achieve sought-after results. And individualism is when rights of conflict between the individual and the community are in conflict, the individual wins. Communitarianism says when they're in conflict, the community wins. So the communitarianisation of Australia is proceeding apace. The right to smoke in public has been taken away from a whole lot of smokers because the community has the right to clean air. And after Port Arthur, the right to own guns has been taken away from a whole lot of gun owners because we have the right to community safety. And we have to understand that we have to collaborate in all sorts of ways to actually build things together. Independence to interdependence. I've quickly talked about that, so I don't need to talk about it anymore. Autocracy to democracy. Well, look at democracies. All the rage, isn't it? Look at Libya, look at Tunisia, look at Bahrain, look at Egypt. All throwing over autocrats and bringing in democracy. Slowly and very painfully. But which side is global public opinion on? On the side of democracy. No question, right? And all these autocracies will go. Everyone, including Iran, within the next 10 or 15 years at the latest. Because The global middle class, which is the product of globalisation, an educated middle class, is getting so huge that now 35% of the Iranian population, and they want 2 children, democracy, so on, okay? Sustainability. Humanity against nature, humanity part of nature. The old view was that humanity was against nature. That's the modern view. We drained swamps, didn't we? But the pre-modern view, the indigenous view, is humanity's part of nature, which has now become the postmodern / planetist view of the world. We have to live within the confines of nature. We can't ignore it. Look at global warming. Nature's hitting back. Look at the tsunamis which have occurred. We have to learn within the power of nature and respond to it. And earthquakes. We actually are now, somehow, the omnipotence of humanity has been severely tested by the power and awesomeness of nature, has it not? Right in the last few weeks. So we're learning several lessons of what's happening in Libya and what's happening in Japan, to name just 2 examples of what I'm talking about today. The next one, development, production, consumption and lifestyles going from unsustainable to sustainable. Now, sustainability means we can do them in such a way that we can do them forever. So I'm going to talk about the first ways and wheres now, to talk about what do we mean by sustainable development, production and consumption. And Buckminster Fuller said, in the 21st century, we have to learn to live within perpetual solar income. He pointed out there's 10,000 times more energy coming from the sun every day than we could ever possibly use. And those you would know that the people who actually find ways of taking solar energy and turning it into useful work, create the ways and wheres to do that, just might become 21st century billionaires, yes? Another one, we have to learn to turn waste into food. In nature, there's no such thing as waste. We all live on a spaceship. Okay, the excrement of one animal is the food for another. We don't have to reduce waste. We have to abolish it as a concept and create ways and wheres for turning waste into food. A third one, we have to work with zero harm or zero collateral damage. Now, I'll talk about this a bit because this is a very fundamental definition of sustainability which you won't get from anybody else, because this is what my work's about. How can you define sustainability? Well, I talked about your doctors, but think about a person having chemotherapy for cancer. Okay, lots of collateral damage to the person to cure the cancer, right? A very inexact, imprecise, unsustainable medicine. But the new technologies based on gene therapy and using enzymes can precisely knock out the cancer so the body's left untouched. That's sustainable medicine. In agriculture, we put the pesticide on the crop. It kills the bugs we meant to kill. It kills the bugs we didn't mean to kill. The fish and swans in the river, and sometimes the person in the plane putting it on. Okay? But the new biological control systems and even some gene therapy means that we can take out the pest and leave the plate untouched. Now, collateral damage comes from the defence industry, of course. You know, it means like we meant to bomb that enemy fort or whatever, but we knock out the school next door. But the precision of the world, in this case, smart bombs, but it's all about creating the ways and wheres for sustainability, which is about precision, finding ways to designing products and services and innovating, all sorts of things to create a world of a sustainable future. So now I'm breaking down all the issues of sustainability to a set of things that we can invent. Ways and wheres for living within solar income, turning waste into food, and zero net collateral damage. There are 3. There are others too. But just giving an illustration. By the way, this is part of a slideshow of 80 slides. I'm showing you about 4. The rest of them is my gift to you. You take them home because it's a toolkit for the future, for planning futures for your industries and your lives too. The next one, patriarchy to gender equality. Now, there are a few patriarchs around, but again, they're planetary rogues, aren't they? And if they're planetary rogues, we might put a boycott on them. We might freeze their bank accounts. We might put a trade ban on them. We might put a capital strike on them. We are now so interconnected that we could withdraw the financial services of the world and they will die. Ask Colonel Gaddafi. He just had all his money supply cut off from the world. And so he should. The situation is that we don't have to bomb everything now. We have to take out a few nasty people, precisely, and put the pressure on the regime so they relent and come down. And of course, we've now created the International Criminal Court, so when they get out, we can take them off there and try them for crimes against humanity. All these things are part of the real world, and we're creating this whole world in our lifetime And this is the 21st century economy and society being involved in. Intercultural and interreligious intolerance and hostility. Well, that's the fundamentalists of the world. They're all cowboys. Okay? Over the other side, we have the so-called modern Islam, modern Christianity, modern Hinduism, modern Buddhism. The idea that there are cowboy Buddhists is a bit strange, right? But they exist in Sri Lanka. They believe in killing Tamil Hindus. They believe in Cambodia. They, after all, created Pol Pot. He was a Buddhist, a practicing Buddhist, as well as a communist. So the whole point about that is that that's part of the world. So what we have to do now is finding ways to negotiate peace building. So we just think about peace building and conflict resolution ways and wheres. The people who create all of those things will become very important. Now let's go back to democracy. I mean, I forgot to mention democracy. I've done a pile of work for the Australian Electoral Commission. And we worked on the idea that democracy was now a 21st century export industry. At the end of the Second World War, there were just 12 democracies on the whole planet. There's now 130, and the rate of growing, there'll be up to 150 pretty soon. Some of them not so fully fledged, but what's in short supply is free and fair elections, yes? So I've suggested to them they create a company called Democracy Australia and export free and fair elections to the planet. We got to the future first in democracy. So we have an export industry, a 21st century in exporting democracy. The know-how of democracy, it's like any other service industry. See how it's working? So from these values, we can start talking about the nature of the emerging 21st century economy. And of course, when we have differences, we can either have combat and have confront, or we can actually have tolerance and harmony. Now, there's a whole series of issues around creating tolerance and harmony. There are educational programs that just taught ways and wheres for tolerance and harmony, intercultural and interreligious. See, what I'm talking about is the things we need to invent, and we must invent because the market is yearning for them today, yes? Absolutely aching for them. So we're talking about, if you go inside your own value systems and touch your own yearnings and multiply the fact that you're one part of 1.6 billion educated middle class people around the world who are shaping the global environment, and the growth of globalisation growing massively every day, we're talking about the nature of the 21st century marketplace. And down the bottom we have defence and security. Remember a little while ago we used to have yellow perils and red hordes? Didn't we? Now the enemy was left in some other country is going to come and take us, yes? That was defence. We now have a security problem. We have Yakuza and triads and mafia putting heroin into our kids in our cities today. We don't have a defence problem, we have a security problem. The whole area of security ways and wheres is a huge area around two things: vigilance and intelligence. Those two key words. Vigilance and intelligence to create whole new industrial future in the security industry. So we're now talking about the nature of the 21st century economy, what the markets will want to have out there in 25 years' time. Success goes to those who get to the future first. So if you start doing it now, or you have an advantage in that, that's good. Look at water, for example. There are two countries in the world that control nearly 90% of the world's water expertise in terms of the United Nations advisors. One of the Dutch who have too much, one of the Israelis who don't have enough. And they created the ways and wheres for managing too much water and not enough water, and they'll have a global export industry to the world. See how it works? Now, what I want you to do is think about, is this a legitimate way to plan your future, your investments? Now, I would suggest one of it is to say, is it safe to do that? But everyone's heart would say, yes, we want that. Everyone's head would say, here, but. So we need some synchronisation between the head and the heart, don't we? But my view is, over time, we want more of those things. So out of this kind of model, we can actually start predicting the whole nature of the emerging 21st century economy and what we can do to invest in it, okay? So they're the key elements of what I wanted to say in terms of the big meanings of what I'm doing. Thinking about the nature of the 21st century economy, how do you plan your investments regimes such a way that you could actually shape these futures, benefit from doing it? Your heart tells you we need these. Your head says, by golly, can we make money out of it, or can we? The answer, oh, yeah, that's the same judgment you would do in any other due diligence exercise. And as I said, George Bernard should, let's go where we would like to go. And I dream of something we should have and ask why not. You see, coming back to the beginning, I talked about the resilient future taker, the manager part of us, and the purposeful future maker, the leader part of us. Yes? So I could talk on for hours and hours, but I'm going to cut this off because we have a lot more time for questions. Okay? Now, 3 thoughts. We cannot work to create a future which you do not first imagine. Now, the brain has 2 big functions. One is memory, which is about the past. One is imagination, which is about the future. Yes? And Michael Rennie, who some of you might know from McKinsey, is fond of saying we do everything twice. The first time when we imagine it, and the second time when we do it. Yep. Now, the second one is this. Those who do not live in the future today will live in the past tomorrow. Now, I'm all for smelling the roses, don't get me wrong. But if all we do is smell the roses and don't think about where we ought to be going or are being taken by others, we're not going to have a very productive and successful life. Getting the balance between what you like is the being part of us and the becoming part of us is something which we all have to work on. And my problem is the becoming part of us all driven by trends and by management. The stuff I've been talking about is where we ought to be going. Everybody on the planet thinks we ought to be creating that world. We should get on and do it. And the important point about that is that if you think about the great leadership of the world, they actually are the visionaries who say they go out in the future in their imagination and say, let's go there, and we do it. So John Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon and back again. And when he did it, no one had a clue how to do it. Martin Luther King said we're going to be to the mountaintop and see the promised land. Think how we responded emotionally to those moments. Very, very important. My bottom line is this. Let this be your mantra. This comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Thank you.